Hello, and we're back. More Soulblight Gravelords. This is getting easier to say the more I say it. Direwolves, fellbats, that's what we're going to look at this week. If you've not seen the first two videos in the series, check it out up there. I'll see you after this. Welcome back, thanks for joining me again. I'm Wayne. If you've seen the last few videos, you'll know we're working on our Soulblight Gravelord army. We're going to get it done before the end of the year. We've talked about colour, we've talked about zombies, we've got zombies done. Next up, we're going to tackle another core part of the list that I've got. So we're going to look at direwolves and we're going to look at some fellbats. Already got a couple of units of these painted up from the Cursed City box. We're going to make them look a little bit different, so we've got some variation in the army, but we want to have a consistency there. Let's look how we can paint them fast and efficiently in a couple of hours, have them looking good and get them right on the tabletop. If you're enjoying these videos, then do give me a subscribe if you're not already. If you are subscribed, thank you very much. It doesn't cost you anything, and it's not going to cost you anything. Hopefully you are getting something out of this. You're enjoying watching along as I get an army ready for battle. Right, enough said. Let's stop waffling. Let's have a look at what we're going to do, at the process we're going to follow to get these wolves and bats ready for the tabletop. We're going to do them all in one, using a couple of simple techniques. Let's have a look at what it's going to be. Okay, so last time we finished off all of the zombies. That was the 100 of them done and out of the way. Next up, we're going to take a look at direwolves and fellbats. So, direwolves are going to be another unit that's quite numerous in my army. I'm going to have 2 packs of 10. Obviously, I want to then get them done fairly fast, quite efficiently, but I want them to look a little bit different just so that I can identify one pack from the next. Next up, we're going to have 2 units of fellbats. Now, I don't actually know if these are going to be any good in the game at all. Much like the direwolves, I want them to look quite different, but I don't want to spend too much time painting them. With that in mind, let's have a look at what we're going to do. Before we look at each of the steps, we're going to have to get some help. We're going to have Dave Direwolf help us here, and of course, his friend, Freddy Fellbat. Now, these guys hang out together a lot of the time. They have a lot in common. They've got fur, they've got fangs, and we're going to use the same colour palette. That's right, we're not going to use any colours on one that we're not going to use on the other. And I'm doing this just for the sake of expediency. I want to get these done and out of the way and on the tabletop. Okay then, so if you've watched the previous video, we're going to pretty much use the same methodology. The colours are going to change slightly, and we've got 1 or 2 steps that are slightly different, but the overall process is going to be consistent. That said, if you've not watched that first video, do stop now, go back and watch it. There's a playlist up here, have a look, and then come back. Now, the zenithal. This is what's going to underpin everything. As I said in the previous video, I use a black prime, and then I zenithal the models from the top, and I often come in, as I have here, with the airbrush, and just reinforce a brighter area at key points on the model. Usually the face. If you've got some other points of interest around the model, then do pick those out too. Just remember that the emphasis should most of the time be on face. Okay, so we're primed, we're zenithaled, we've picked out the faces. Let's get into the first thing that we're going to do. Now, I'm going to use a light grey over the top of that black zenithal base. Why am I going to do that? Well, it's going to give an even consistency to the skin that we're going to put on in the next step. Why am I using grey? Well, no reason really. I mean, it's light enough that it's not going to be too saturated over the white that we put on as part of the zenithal, so it's still going to show through there, but also it's consistent enough that it won't change the colour of what we're going to put on the top of it in the next step. And we can use it to dull down the next colour as well. So let's have a look at what we're going to do. The skin then is going to be green, necrotic flesh, because zombie direwolves are dead. But fellbats aren't, I hear you say. Well, I don't think they are anyway. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the grey from the previous step that I still have left over, and I'm going to mix in a little bit of the green that I use on the direwolves. That way we're not using a different colour, but we're going to get 2 different finishes. I'm running this through the airbrush. You could brush it on if you want. For expediency, I tend to paint a lot with an airbrush. Whichever floats your boat, you use whatever works for you guys. Looking at the direwolves, I'm going to hit the fleshy part with the green. I'm not going to be too worried about the paint spilling onto areas where I don't necessarily want it. We can tackle that later on. Just be as neat as you possibly can. And the same with the fellbats. There's very few areas of skin on these anyway. So I'm just going to hit the high points of the wing membrane around the face and around the knuckles and ankles. Okay, so we've got a little bit to do at this point. Now, what we want to do is introduce the main body of the colour that we've got here. So we want to hit the fur with a black paint. Also, we want to use something like a purple or a deep red, and we're going to use that on the direwolves to indicate areas of bruising, where the flesh is falling off of the bone, tendons, that sort of thing. And on the fellbats, we're going to use on the wing membranes, ears, and a little bit around the face just to give some areas of interest. Now, once we've done that, then I'm going to come back in and we're going to use a unifying dry brush color just to hit the entire model, highlight the fur a little bit, and also pick out some areas of interest on the flesh. We've got a lot of texture on both of these models, so it's not a problem. And that's really going to give us the emphasis of the hanging off flesh of the direwolf, all of that wonderful fur, and then the texture of the wings of the fellbat. That's going to set us up for the next stage. Okay, so we're in a fairly good place now. This is an optional step and one that I would strongly recommend you use, but if you don't have oil paints, then it's certainly one that you can skip over. Your model should already look like they're a reasonable tabletop standard now anyway, so it's entirely up to you if you want to do this. Now, the reason I use the oils is it makes it very simple to do a blend of the colors and it gives the nice finish that I like on my models. It's a little bit grimy, a little bit more grim dark, I suppose, if you want to go with that, but it does work. Now, we're going to use a couple of colors here. We're going to use black, red, purple. Okay, so how are we going to do that? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is an all over wash of a very thin black oil. Now, usually you want oil washes to be quite thick and you remove any excess later on once it's had a little bit chance to dry. I'm not going to do that with these models. With these being rank and file troops and being a lot of them really, I don't want to spend too much time on them, and using quite a thin down black wash, oil wash, is going to let us get all of the detail that we want. It's going to start to really reinforce the black fur that we've already got on both the bat and the wolf, and it's going to get into the recesses and start to define areas on the models. Now, while that's still wet, we want to come in with the purples and the reds, and again, this is really subjective. However you think it looks cool. So on the direwolf, I'm going to add it obviously around the torn flesh, around the mouth, any place you see tendons or you want to look like there's organs hanging out, anything like that, anything that's been pulled off of it that's gross, zombie-like. Putting these colours in and letting them mix together quite organically is going to give you a really good look without too much effort. Now, the fellbat, a little bit different. We want to use that purple in the deepest crevices of the wings. Then around the face and the inner ears of the fellbat, I'm just going to go in with a little bit of purple and then a little bit of red, just to give some emphasis to the muzzle and the inner ears, just so that it doesn't look like it's one colour. And with that said, we can get on to the last step. And the last thing we've got to do then is the details. The eyes first. I'm going to come in with a white and just dot the eyes in the first instance, because I'm going to come back in with a yellow or a red just to make those eyes really pop and stand out and bring more emphasis to the face. The next thing we're going to do is use a white or an off-white in my case, and I'm going to pick out the fangs on both the direwolves and the fellbats. Okay, the last thing I'm going to use then is a bone colour, and I'm going to pick out any bone at all but the upper parts of the bone on the direwolf. So thinking about the rib cage, just the upper part where the light might be hitting it. For the fellbats then, we're going to do pretty much the same thing. Now, you can, again, if you like at this point, pick out the elbows, the knuckles, and there's a few ridges on the tail of the fellbats, and you could even come in with a secondary dry brush at the very high points of the wings if you wanted to, and a little around the muzzle. I did a little of that around the muzzle, but I left the wings as they were. And with that, we're done. Let's have a look at what we've got then. And we're done. That's another unit ready for battle. Another 2 units, in fact. So we've got direwolves, we've got fellbats, we've got zombies. That's the majority of the swarm chaff units done and out of the way. Not looked at skeletons yet, but we're gonna cover a specific skeletal unit later on in the series. Skeletons are something that I'll come back to later because there's a couple of different ways we can paint them, but I'm not going to be painting any more of those. I've already done them. But if you do want to see skeletons specifically, you know what to do. Comment, let me know. We can have a look. I'll pick some up. There's always space for some more skeletons. So the death rattle, kind of cool sculpts as well. So let me know. Right, that's it for this week. Next week, we're going to start looking at some more of the elite units, specifically Blood Knights. Have a good hobby week, and I'll see you on the other side. Thanks for joining me.